Debt ceiling talks are set to resume tomorrow. This weekend, President Biden telling reporters he's, quote, optimistic that they can reach an agreement. Meantime, House Speaker McCarthy telling NBC Today, quote, I still think we are far apart. Joining us now are Jimmy Pethokoukis of the American Enterprise Institute and Mike Feroli, J.P.Morgan's chief U.S. economist. Good afternoon to you both. Jimmy P., I'll start with you. It looks like spending caps, permitting reform, rescinding of some of that COVID money that hasn't been spent yet are very much on the table. Are we actually getting close to a deal here, or is it happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's really not that hard, I think, to predict what a final deal might look like broadly. Some sort of, spending caps, much shorter than what the Republicans said before, and some of those other items that you just mentioned. So I think we can imagine that. The tricky part is I think McCarthy is going to sound like that up until about 30 seconds before there's a deal. He has to sell this deal to his members. He has to sound tough. It has to sound like, the president caved. He needs that for cover. And it's a really good sign, I think, that some progressives are saying that Biden looks like he's caving, because Republicans are going to have to perceive this as some sort of win. So I think the news we're hearing right now is actually pretty good.
Okay. Mike, how are you factoring all of this into your economic modeling right now? I mean, consensus is that we're going to get a deal at some point here, maybe even if not this week before everybody starts traveling, maybe at least before the end of the month. But how are you factoring into how you're thinking about the U.S. economy through the rest of the year, which last I checked, I think you were forecasting mild recession.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd agree with a lot of the things Jim just said there about the prospects for the discussions. I would add one complicating factor is that the calendar just got shortened quite a bit relative to what we thought only 2 weeks ago, right? When we learned about the April tax payments coming in on the light side. That means the X date, or the so-called drop dead date, we think could be as soon as June 7th, right? So to get a major piece of legislation like this done in that time frame, I think just adds to the challenge. In terms of how we're factoring it in, so given, like Jim, we think the most likely scenario is a deal gets done. That means we don't have a technical default in our forecast and in our economic outlook. I think if we did, that would vastly complicate not only the economic outlook, but thinking about it, because we've never had that before in the history of the Republic, of course. So we don't have anything to really benchmark that to. And I think we clearly think it would be much, much worse than a government shutdown. And I think it's important to distinguish those things. I think even with a benign resolution, you could still see some hit to sentiment like you did in 2011. So even with a resolution, there may be a little bit of a sentiment hit. And also, I think you probably would see some more fiscal restraint. So monetary policy would have to do less because fiscal policy presumably is doing more to hold back spending growth in the economy.
Okay. Jimmy, all this makes sense to me 10 years ago, but I don't understand why there's such optimism that we're getting closer to a deal in 2023, because the parties aren't operating normally. I have a hard time seeing how Speaker McCarthy gets this narrow Republican majority to go ahead and agree to a deal if it looks like anything short of disaster for the president. And I have a hard time imagining that the president would agree to a deal that looks like a disaster if he plans to run again. So why all this optimism and this thought that they're not going to run over the cliff when they practically did it with the speaker votes not too long ago?
Yeah, well, first of all, right, things aren't operating well. I think Mike actually makes a great point that we're getting this close. I mean, that's a sign of deep dysfunction. And things are far closer to, not happening than what they should be. And again, I think it's a big plus that it's certainly my perception that Kevin McCarthy and other top Republicans don't fundamentally buy into the theory that this is no big deal and we can just prioritize payments and markets will really like it. I don't think they think that. I think they think this would be a disaster. And I think neither side wants to try to play a game where we have a technical default, markets go haywire, and somehow they can win that game. Boy, that is really moving beyond the veil, which we have no idea. I don't think either side wants that, which means they can get a deal. And again, I can conceive of a deal, as we just said, which it looks like the president has conceded, and there's pain on the other side that he could get through. But listen, this is far narrower than what it should be, no doubt.
Mike, what's your percentage likelihood that there is a technical default or close enough to one that the markets go haywire?
Geez, I think that's a real tough one, but I'd put it maybe around 20%.
Okay.
I think I think markets clearly have something less than that. If you look at the default, CDS default market is maybe more like 4%.
Okay.
Yeah.